So actually, today we have a service design marathon day 7. So we already run for the even a little bit longer than 1 week. And the initial plan of this marathon was that let's create something for a Ukrainian community. Let's somehow support them. But then we decided, isn't it a great time to make something global? And so it is that how this marathon appeared. And the marathon organized by Service Design Network Ukraine, by Lanka Service Design Agency, and with huge support of Service Design Network HQ. And just a few words about organizers. So, me and Oleg, we are co-founders of Service Design Network Ukraine. And I'm a service designer and head of design in software company. And Oleg is a strategic design, a service designer and founder of a service design agency, Lanka. And so today he will deliver his topic. So Oleg, stage is yours.
Thank you, Katya. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you came, and I'm glad you're interested in the topic. Basically, just a few more words about myself. I would like to share with you my path to service design. It actually started in 2015 when I became the head of customer experience for Kyivstar, which is a major mobile operator in Ukraine. And then I was just sent to the training of service design. So I was like forced. But then that became my hobby and my passion. We established the in-house service design function within Kyivstar. I was doing project myself. I was teaching and coaching other service designers. And then 2 years later, I co-founded the service design agency, which now evolved to Lanka, to my own service design agency. So basically, I started from in-house service design and then went to the agency side. We do different type of projects, starting from a small one, like a few day design sprint to introduce service design to a company, to a service design or customer experience transformation projects, which may last several years with the major Ukrainian companies. And today I want to talk about the platforms. Many of you probably have seen this picture before. So platforms are very popular in the world, and they are also quite rich and quite successful. So basically 7 out of 10 companies in 2018, most expensive companies in 2018 were platforms. And when I looked at our clients, I noticed that actually most of them you can also consider a platform. We work with 2 big mobile operators, Vodafone and Lifecell, and they are actually a platform for connecting people. We worked for OLX, which is a classical classified online platform, C2C platform. Then we worked for Nova Poshta, which is a logistics operator, which is actually connecting internet shops with their users and deliver their goods. We work for the bank, which you might consider a platform which is connecting lenders and borrowers. We work with Yeva, which is a big druggery chain, and again, you might consider them a platform between suppliers and consumers. And we work with Unica, which is the insurance company, international one. Frankly speaking, I don't know in which way they are the platform, so maybe they are not. We should work at least with some companies which are not platforms. And before we move on, I would like you to type in the chat which platforms do you use regularly, and if there is a point of frustration, what would be the point of frustration for you at these platforms? Mm. Review. So reviews are the point of frustration. Okay. Okay, it's interesting because I would expect that you would complain on the other party services. So like many Airbnb users would complain that the flat was not as advertised, or eBay user would say that, well, the good was not delivered in time, or Uber driver was talking too much or knowing language too little. It's quite often that on the platforms, two users would complain about each other, and believe me, Uber drivers, when they talk to each other, they complain a lot about passengers, and sometimes we really give them a reason to complain. So when you design a platform, or when you design some user case scenarios, or when you design the value proposition, you really need to take into account two parties, and only when you can satisfy both, then the service can actually be successful. So it makes the work more difficult. And I would start with the small case from ours, which is several years old, but I like it very much. The startup called Carbook approached us and asked us to provide our services. It was actually the first time I was asked to provide exactly service design. But first, I need to put into the context. The cars in Ukraine are quite old, and these four are actually very popular on the roads now. I wonder whether you had a chance to drive one of those sometime. But that's the case. And because the country is poor and the cars are cheap and they are usually not new, people don't go to the official dealership. They would serve those cars on the small car repair shops. So the car book was actually the platform that would help car owners to book the visit to a car shop, to a car repair shop. And at the time we met, actually they already had this beautiful website. They had a map of the entire country with most of the car repair shops already placed on the map, with their rates, with their services, with their exact location, with their pictures. So the service was very elaborate already, and I was really impressed. And so I asked them, well, how can we help you then? And they told us, we still have some problems, and these problems might be quite familiar for many online services. So many people come to the service and then they immediately go. Very few people are actually using filters. So you could specify exact service you need. You would specify the price range you agree to pay, and the service would automatically provide you with online booking, even if car shop doesn't have internet access. So they would take your booking and then uh, make an appointment for you with the service. But nobody is actually using it. So the only service case scenario that was popular was like open the map, find the car repair shop, do several clicks, find the direct phone for the car repair shop and make a booking. And that was not the case. They wanted to be the major one. So they had an idea, and the idea was the following. Actually, when the car breaks, you're usually inside the car. So you don't have your desktop with you. So probably you need an app to solve your issue with the car. So they had an idea of running the mobile app. And because we are not the mobile app developer, I asked them again, how can we help you? And they said, Oleg, we have so many features on the website, they don't fit into the mobile app. So we want you to decide which features are the most essential ones for the app for the car user, car owner. And that's how the project started. And now I would like to take a step back and tell you how we usually work in our projects. Usually, as an agency, we are not working for the client, we are not working for the company, but we are working with the company. So our usual structure of the project would be like that. There will be one or two service designers, facilitators from the agency side, and then there will be a project team from the customer side. And the team size might be something between 5 and up to 20 people who would actually participate during the project. We work in the form of the workshops. And there will be one or two workshops where we frame the challenge. Then we would train the group to do the interviews, and they would do the in-depth interviews with their customers, and we would meet on the workshops, telling each other the story of the customers. So again, it's not the agency who do the interview, it's the client who do. Then we would synthesize the outcomes of those interviews and come up with the new ideas and new prototypes for the service. And the same happened this time. I would say almost the entire team of the startup was participating in the workshop in redesigning their service. And what I should also mention is that this startup is not coming like from, I don't know, students' bench. The people who founded the startup, they actually had over 50 years in automotive industry combined. So they were very experienced in this sphere. So how did the project evolve? After the interviews, they learned a couple of interesting things. First of all, they learned that people actually do not buy the car to repair it. They buy it to use it. And sometimes, only sometimes, they actually come to repair shops. So it's not the people's main goal to serve the car. It's difficult to see when you are inside the industry. Then they learned that, well, not everybody knows what is constant velocity universal spheric joint. I had to Google this one to translate it to English. Then apparently not every people know that you need to change a motor oil in your car. That was even bigger surprise. And yes, we met a nice girl who is using her car for a couple of years, and she didn't know that she would have to do something with her motor oil before we actually did the interview. And what's more interesting, that people who don't know about motor oil, they still don't want to know about it. And what we also found is that quite often the happy car owners, they have Leonchik. And Leonchik is the name of the person. And it's a real name of the real case study. And we use this Leonchik very often because it was a story of the women. She is in her middle ages and she had problems at work, and she had problems with her kids, and she has problems in her personal life, and she doesn't have a new car, it's an old car. And she could complain about anything in her life, and we told her, well, probably serving your car is also a problem. And she said, no, this is the only problem, the only sphere of my life where I don't have any problem, because I have Leonchik. Leonchik is the guy, I don't know how they met, but anytime she has a problem with the car, she phones to the Leonchik saying, well, I have something with my car. He comes, takes the keys, looks at the car, fixes if he can fix it himself. If not, he would take the car to the repair shop, talk to the mechanics, their strange language, would bring the car back and basically return the keys. And if the car owner doesn't call him for a long time, he would call himself asking whether it's not the time to change the motor oil. And basically that was a prototype of the ideal service, because we saw how to make the customer really happy. But before going to the solution, we actually come up with the beautiful map of the personas of car owners, and we could easily identify them. That's interesting, because you don't see this map until you create it, and after you create it, you just don't realize how could it be that it wasn't obvious before. So there are people who are seasoned car owners. They know how to repair the car themselves. The only reason they use car shops is because they don't have some specific tools. Otherwise, they would do everything on their own. There are car fans who love their car more than themselves, and they are very demanding users. There are misers, so basically people who don't want to spend a cent on their car. And I remember having the user who had his car already broken, so his car would stop every time he turned left. So he was picking the route so that he turns right all the time. And then the rider, the person who actually ride the car, who drive the car, and who would prefer probably to be a passenger, and who has no idea how the car works. And if we think about the idea of the startup, we could see that seasoned and experienced car owners don't really need this service, because they know where to find the repair shop and how to check if it's trustworthy. The car fan also has no problem because he would usually have some other friends with the same car types, and they would suggest the solution to each other. And the person who don't want to spend money on the service is not a very attractive user as well. So it was an obvious choice for the service to focus on the riders. And basically, it was not the first time they did try to create their personas. First, they did it mathematically. So they come up with like 7 to 8 matrix with some parameters, and each cell in Excel would be a persona, but they very often quickly realized that having 56 personas is not feasible. You cannot do it with them. They come up with a hypothetical one, so they guessed who could be their user. It could be a manager, a taxi driver, a housewife, etc. So basically, they come up with 11 hypothetical personas. The only problem with those personas was that, as the founder of the startup later said, well, they were all great in understanding how the car works. Because when you work for the industry for many years, you cannot guess that there are people who don't know that you need to change motor oil. So this is the rider, the person who has no idea how car works and don't really want to know how it works. And what do you think is the biggest challenge to them? What's their biggest fear? Can you type it in the chat? To talk to mechanics. Yes, it's a challenging task. Other ideas? Yeah, breaking the car is a challenge. Get into an accident is their nightmare. Yeah, it's absolutely the biggest challenge for them. Was not even talking to mechanics. Yes, it's a big struggle to them. But the biggest fear is exactly that my car would stop and I wouldn't know what to do. So this is what should be the value proposition for the car owners, that we know how to ensure that your car would never stop. And yes, talking about interaction with the service centers, it's a nightmare for them as well, because they speak the same language, like Ukrainian, Russian, but they don't understand each other at all. And they both feel stupid and silly and very much annoyed by the other part. And the question like, what was done to your car last time, confuses the car owner a lot. And without knowing this information, the mechanic cannot do anything. So that was actually the very important understanding of the user base. And now coming back to the service, what out of this nice website the rider could use? The only feature they can use here is the phone, because the only thing which might in theory help you is just having the person on the phone and just in the dialogue to learn at least something. So basically, it became obvious that the only app the user would need on their phone is the sauce button, because this is the only feature they would use out of those. And if you need a sauce button, for you it's enough just to have your phone number stored in the address book. You don't need an app for that. It's already there. So the service decided not to design an app altogether. Instead of that, they increased their investment into the CRM system. So the CRM system would know what has been done to the car, what's need to be done now, and what needs to be done next. And this is the first prototype we did, which is just letting people to talk. And this simple prototype actually doubled the conversion rate of the website. So it doubled the number of orders, or I don't know, like $100. Now it looks better, but it still works the same. Out of other prototypes that we created for them was the service design. So basically the scenario for the user, and also an onboarding process, because onboarding process in this case is very tricky. Because when car stops on the road, you don't go to Google to look for the solution. You would call somebody you know so that they help you. So we understood that in order we need to onboard the customer before he has the first accident. But at the same time, the problem is that the rider doesn't really Google some car-related terms. So you cannot use inbound traffic to attract users. You need to proactively approach people who don't want to hear a word about the car. So that was a tricky challenge that we had to solve, and we did solve it. And basically, this was the stop of the end of our project. But of course, the startup continued to operate. And in a couple of months, we met with the founder, and he told us the really interesting story. This is how the regular car shop repair center would look like. This is a good one. They do their job perfectly well, but it doesn't look attractive. Is it possible that they don't need new customers? Is it possible that any business doesn't need more customers? Why is it so ugly? And Janela, I want to disappoint you. This one doesn't. Every time a new customer comes, the person who actually meets new customer, he says like, oh shit, because he has all his boxes already full. He has a line of waiting customers for another week. So he really don't need new customers. Most of car repair shops who do their work well already have enough customers. They are overbooked. And of course, Carbook doesn't want to deal with the car repair shops which do the poor job. So they realized that there is no demand from the other side of the platform. There is obvious demand and obvious need for the service from the car owners, and we could identify it and test it, but there is no demand from the car service. So they had to pivot, and in my view, they pivoted elegantly. They did it without our help, but I'm really proud for them. They decided that they would develop the system, which is something in between of CRM and ERP system for the car repair shops that would automate part of their internal processes. Because most of the car repair shops are created by the people who used to be a mechanics, and they are very bad in business planning, business process management, etc., etc. So even small help and small advice how to manage the work of the car repair shop actually increase their productivity substantially, like by 20, 50, 100%, and then they need new customers. So that Anastasia says that they do not realize that it could be other way without huge investment. I really don't understand the question. If you want, you can just unmute yourself and say it. It could look the other way. Okay, I'm sorry, I still don't get the question. If you don't mind, I would like to continue. So this is our first hands-on experience with the platforms. And now I want to talk to you about the platform of the platforms. This is, well, Ukraine is quite known for the high level of corruption, unfortunately. But actually, we had a very successful government procurement reform, which happened a couple of years ago. And our state procurement system is actually now an award-winning system. And the system works very interestingly. So the system is called Prozoro, which is a mixture of transparency and Zoro. And it's really a platform of the platforms. So if you are the government institution and you want to buy some services, you would go to the special portal, one of many portals. Actually, there are about 20 portals which have the same functionality. So you can pick those 20, you go to it and you place basically the service or the good you want to buy. Then this information goes to the central database, which is Prozoro. And from that, it is automatically populated to all other portals. So regardless which portal you come to, all other portals immediately show the same lot. And then if you want to participate in the lot, you can again go to any portal you want to actually place your bid to declare that you want to supply the good or service. The beauty of this system is that it was launched like I think in 4 months from the beginning to the end. And this is because the government was only in charge of developing the major processes and the database, which is the Prozoro. And the commercial companies who had previous experience with e-commerce were developing the portals. So basically, the government provides an API, and anybody can create a portal which would provide an access. And the business model is simple. The service is free for the government and for any governmental institution. And suppliers pay a small fee when they participate in each government tender. So the whole system is self-funded, very competitive. So each portal essentially provides absolutely the same service, which is specified by the government, and they can compete only on the quality of service, quality of customer support, quality of user interface, and this is the only way they compete, because the fee is the same, it's fixed, the functionality is the same, everything is the same. So we were approached by one of the portals, and they asked us to help them to find the service which would actually differentiate them from the competitors. And here I should explain you another format we work, which is called we call it service design sprint. And it's a rather short engagement with the client. At the same time, it helps us to solve some specific challenges. So basically, we use design sprint for one of two purposes: either to solve a specific problem or to just introduce service design to our client, to let them first-hand experience with service design. Basically, the entire project is done in 3 workshops. On the first workshop, we, together with the client, come up with the ideas and hypotheses we want to test, and we also try to guess how the customer does the job already now. With these hypotheses, we prepare the interview guide, and we send again our client to do the interviews. On the next workshop, they just share the information they learned from the interviews and define the moment of truth and the main challenges the customer have. And on the last day, they ideate and create lo-fi prototypes and test them. So in just 3 days, but of 3 days of very intense work, they go through all the design process and they can achieve substantial business results at the same time. So in this case, we picked 2 challenges because for the design sprint, it's very important to have a very small, very specific challenge. So the challenge was how to retain new suppliers on the platform, because they had a very high churn rate from those who participated in the tender for the first time. And we picked a specific industry, which was IT distributors, because they were quite popular and they had a low retention rate. And at the same time, another challenge was how could we attract experienced suppliers who currently trade from other platforms. And again, we had to pick the industry, and we chose the pharma companies because they do they do participate in many tenders. So basically, on the first day, the only thing they had to do, the team, was to guess how the customer participate in the tender now. And of course, they started mapping their journey from let's say from the login page. So basically, the customer comes to our system, goes through the bids, finds the one which is appropriate, and then so on and so on. But we forced them to think wider, like what happens during the day of the person who is actually trading, what happens before the system, what happens outside the system, what happens after the bid is placed, etc. And with those questions, they had to go to their interviews, and the feedback we got, which was, well, I like it very much. They said that, well, this is not the first time we talk to the customers, we talk to them very often. But usually we spoke with them about how they sell using our system. And this time we talked about how they actually sell. And they learned a lot of things that happened outside the platform, which was actually very important. And we built during those 3 days two prototypes, one for each segment, and they were very unusual, I would say. The first one was actually a board game, because one of the insights we learned from the newbies, from those who participated in the tender for the first time, is that if they don't lose the first round, well, if they lose their first bid, there is a very low probability that they would continue. And the thing with which they struggled is actually playing the auction. Because after you put bid in the system would run 3 rounds of price reduction. And during each round, you would have to place a new price, and everybody would see your new price. And then after each round, basically, people would bring their prices down. And if you are not experienced player, you don't know how to place the bid so that you win in the end, even if you have a competitive price and you have a cost advantage. So we created a board game which would emulate the process, which you can play with your friends to learn. Basically, the card will be specify what's your minimal price you can offer, and then you would place the bid, and everybody on the table would place the bid, and you would play 3 rounds and see who wins. And we actually played this game on the workshop. It's rather entertaining. I lost several hryvnias playing it because we were playing on small financial bets. But that was the solution. I would never expect the board game as the solution for the online service. And another one was very interesting. It was for experienced users who actually participate in many tenders. We learned that basically every sales manager who is a sales manager, regardless which company they work for, they have 3 major activities. It's basically negotiations, it's preparing the offers, and then it's preparing the reports for the manager, for your superior, for your boss. And in case of the state well, in participating in the tenders, the report would be an Excel table, a big one, where you would specify every tender that was on the platform, then every tender you participated in, who were the participants of the tender, what were their offers, what were their price, what was our price. So the reason why we won or didn't won in this competition. And each sales manager in every pharma company would have to prepare this report for themselves, just with copying and pasting the figures from the system to the Excel table. But the whole information is publicly available and stored in Prozoro system. So it was really easy to produce the standardized report with all the important information the sales manager needs. And basically what we tested is that if we propose these reports to the sales managers, they would be happy to use our system instead of our other platforms. So in this case, what we learned is that when you understand the whole context of using the service, you can come up with the cheap, inexpensive solutions which would actually complement your service very well. I don't know whether there is any question about the approach we use or about the service, this particular.
Well, please use chat for the questions if you have. Actually, I have a question. So it's pretty complicated domain because it's like it's a collaboration with the government. So how you got the domain expertise?
Thank you, Katya. Basically, this is how we usually get a domain expertise in any project, is because we involve the stakeholders into the workshop. So basically, the work group which was participating in this particular design sprint, they were people who were like a product owners, sales managers, process owners from the platform, because this project is actually, we did it with the platform. So the platform is a commercial organization.
Mm-hmm. And have you
Mm,
involved lawyers, let's say, because if you will, for example, if you will break the law, yes, it might have a lot of consequences. So, or it was not needed to involve
uh,
such.
You know, we invite lawyers quite often to the design sprints, not in this case, because the product owners of this specific service, they know the regulation very well. So they cooperate closely with the major platform, with Prozoro. So they know the interconnection and they know the rules and the policies. So we didn't need them this time. But yes, quite often we invite lawyers to the room, to the workshop.
Cool, thank you. Um, any questions?
Okay, I will move to the next one, and this is the last case for the night. Again, it was done through this service design sprint format. I should probably mention that we already tested it in a remote work from home mode as well. It works. It's challenging, but yes, apparently you can do service design involving the client remotely. Yes, it works. So after we did the project with the platform, we actually shared it on several service design events here in Ukraine. And then we were approached by the head of customer experience of the main system of Prozoro. And this was actually our first experience with the governmental institutions. And this one was a really positive one. So it was a really positive engagement. And they came to us and say, well, we want to try to use service design in our work, so please join us and help us. And we started with again finding the right challenge to solve, and their expert well, they are quite advanced in customer experience because they collect feedback from users on different occasions. They are really interested in creating a positive experience apart from fighting the corruption. And they came back with three problems which are very critical to actually the participants who want to sell. So government suppliers, they complain about too many documents which are required for each particular tender. They also complain that quite often the purchase requirement is written, so you can see that it's written for a particular participant and you have feel disadvantaged. And the third is that in some smaller tenders, the government institution is not obliged to answer to suppliers' comments, questions, or when they are not obliged to, they are quite often don't answer to the questions. So these were two complaints from the supplier side. But as we already mentioned on the platform, one party may actually be the pain point of another one. So we decided to actually work with the procurement part, with the government institutions, to see what prevents them from being honest, fair, and communicative with the potential suppliers. Because we believe that most people, essentially good people, so they are honest, and it's not because they are corrupt. Because again, it's a service design sprint, it's a small format, we had to specify the challenge. Uh, Claudia, I will answer your question. So basically, we had to be more specific. We picked specific industries for each challenge. So we wanted to help a buyer of construction works to make a purchase request which would ensure the decent quality of the service, because this is the industry where it's most often seen that the purchase request is written for a specific company. So we believe that this is because they want to ensure the quality, and we want to help them to get the quality without specifying the exact supplier. Then we saw a lot of documents in every tender in liquid fuel segment, and we saw a lot of questions which are not answered when people procure the service of construction design. Claudia was asking what are indicators for the right challenge. It's there should be a user in the challenge. From this regard, the last challenge, how to increase the number of fair decisions, is a bad one because there is no user in it. But there should be a user. The challenge should be in the format how to help the user do something they definitely need to do. So it's not like how we improve the world. It should be very, very specific. It should be tailored to very narrow audience. And well, frankly speaking, it comes with the experience. We had a couple of very bad challenges. We learned from them, and now we are a little bit better at this. So basically, if you want to run such format, and if you are in doubt whether the challenge is good or bad, just, well, you can reach me through any social network you want, and I will be glad to help you. So these were the challenges. And in this particular case, again, we had to make a cross-functional team, and the team was not only cross-functional, it was also cross-company. So we took people from Prozoro. They were like designers, product owners, business analysts. We took several people from the Ministry of Economics, who actually are policy makers for the government procurement. So they knew the rules better than anybody else. And we also invited several people from the platforms. So several people from competing platforms were already also part of the team, because Prozoro wants to make everything they do very transparent. So any platform which wants would learn our insights firsthand. We also had to talk to several stakeholders to make sure that the project is actually needed. So we met with the department head of the Ministry of Economy. She was quite skeptical about the format, because this is the first time she learned about design approach, but she was quite supportive in the challenges. So she confirmed that yes, the challenges are right, we need to solve them, they seem logical. And because again, this is a B2B service, we start not even with the customer journey, we start with the stakeholder map, who is a stakeholder in the procurement. And it was actually quite surprising that we could name several dozen people in different organizations who would have their stake in the process. But in the end, we focused on two of them. One is the person who is actually supporting the administrative process of procurement, and another is a beneficiary who actually wants to buy goods, who needs the goods we are ordering. Then we put ourselves in customer shoes and tried to map the entire process from how the need comes up till it's satisfied. I learned that it usually takes 2 years, because you have a need, then you need to approve the budget, then you need to get the budget, and then you follow the procurement path. So we looked really aside of the service. And then we sent the team to do the interviews. And this was the first project where it was not that easy. Because if you do something wrong with the procurement procedure, you may be prosecuted, and there is the criminal responsibility for some mistakes. So when people from Prozoro are calling to the state servants, asking them to talk about some specific procurement they did, they usually say, well, we did everything right, and then they cite the law, just by paragraph, what did I do, instead of the real story. So it was rather difficult to get the real stories and see the real and we learned is that despite the fact that you have a customer base, it's better to use your network. So the stories we got, which were useful, they were all coming from people who trust us initially, who was not a random user of Prozoro system, but the one who knows us or knows somebody who knows us, and they were much more open in the negotiation. And those interviews were actually quite engaging. And the first very positive outcome was that the system, Prozoro system, the platforms are fine. People learned how to use them. They use them often. They don't really have any issue with using the system. Of course, there are minor tweaks and tricks you can do, but overall, the system works. Nobody is complaining about it. But, and this is very often the case, that in the service design project, the problem is actually outside the system. We learned that in this specific category of the fluid fuel, there is no issue with many documents, unfortunately for us, fortunately for the users. It's because there are not so many traders of the fuel, and they usually have the prepared pack of documents, like I don't know, 40 licenses and certificates. They are already zipped in one file. So they send this file not even looking at the requirements for the tender. They just send it. So maybe in some other categories, this is an issue, but for traders of the petrol or diesel fuel, it's not an issue at all. So this issue, we didn't work on it anymore. Then we learned about the construction services. And apparently this is a very difficult category to buy. And if you tried to find the person or company who would repair your home, you know that this is difficult, because for the person who is procuring these services, it's very difficult to check the quality. And if the quality is bad, it's very difficult to redo the works later. And it's very difficult to see, because sometimes the poor quality would show up like in a couple of years when you see cracks. So it's very difficult to test. And at the same time, for the supplier, it's very difficult to prove the quality. So if you want to find something that is not good, you will always find it, and it's really difficult to finish the project if you are doing it for the person you don't know before. So both parties are actually looking for the people they know for the tender. And we understood that this is a real challenge, because construction services are quite a big chunk of government expenses. But unfortunately, in this case, we didn't have a domain expert. None from the team was expert in construction. We were experts in procurement, in design, in everything, but not in construction. And because we couldn't find one easily for the workshop, and we had only three workshops for this project, we had to abandon this service. But we considered it to be the good project for the next time, good challenge for the next time, because this is an obvious challenge, which is like many hundreds of millions of dollars of government spending. So it's really big in stakes. So yes, you need a domain expert in any design project. And then we discovered the thing which wasn't obvious from the very beginning. We discovered that when the company buys something regularly, I don't know, if you are the music school and you are buying music instruments, or if you are I don't know, some government agency and you are buying some stationery, it's not a problem at all. But when you have to buy something unusual, this is a challenging task. For example, we had a story of the musical school who had to buy a project, basically the design of the fire alarm system. And well, you never buy an alarm system, not talking about the design of the alarm system. So they struggled a lot with this procurement, and it happens. So many times the agency would or the institution would have to buy something they are not familiar with at all. And in this case, the struggle is twofold, because you don't know what to buy, and when suppliers ask some specific questions, you cannot answer. This is very similar to the first case, to the rider. The rider cannot talk to mechanics because they speak different language. It's all the same here. So if I'm buying something unusual to me and I'm asked some specific questions, I ignore those questions because I don't want to look silly, and I cannot answer the question at all. So this is the problem for both sides, and this is the challenge we actually were working on during the last day, and we come up with several solutions. The first one was actually, well, I didn't know, but government institutions can hire a consultant. And for a small fee, they would do the job and they would solve the challenge, and it wouldn't cost much to the agency, to the government institution. Most likely, they would actually save more than they would pay the consultant. But well, nobody knows they can, and because they don't know that they can, they don't use this option. So we just need to communicate this option as such. Then Prozoro system has actually an extensive set of manuals on their website. So you can see how to do the procurement, how to prepare documents, how to place the bid, how to make changes to the business load, how to communicate with user, etc. There are a lot of them, but they are all about the system, and there are none of them about how to procure some specific items, like how to procure the stationery, how to procure the fuel, how to procure, I don't know, some like construction services. So they decided that they would actually create the video tutorials for some specific categories. And then actually we learned what usually helps. So when you need to buy something, you look for advisor. An advisor might be just another person who did the same purchase recently. So the main idea for us was this, that every time the person something unusual, they can talk to somebody who is buying this regularly or who bought it recently and who is already familiar with the topic. Because sometimes like a 10-minute phone call would save weeks of work for the person who is buying it for the first time. And the last solution was actually to teach the government institutions to talk to suppliers. Because again, because of all the hype about corruption, the government, well, the state servants, they are afraid of talking to the suppliers because they're afraid of being accused. They were afraid of being accused as corrupt. But apparently it is not. If you follow these basic simple rules, you can actually talk to suppliers. And the last, our prototype was the instruction, basically like a small comics on how to talk to the supplier in a transparent way. So if you follow the rules, you are not actually suspected in any corrupt decisions. So these were the solutions for this. And just again, I want to share with you the customer journey of the person who is buying something for the government. There is a need, then you request a budget, then you wait for approval. And again, this may take longer than a year. Then you, for the first time, you interact with the Prozoro system, you put in the plan of the future purchases. You need to put it in advance. And then this all nightmare starts when you need to prepare all the specification for the thing you don't know how to buy. And then you do the bidding and basically wait for the delivery. So we could identify that if we could screen all the planned purchases for the ones which are new to the specific company, and then we'll suggest them our 4 solutions for the service. Basically, this is the last case I wanted to share with you. And while you are typing your questions, if there are any, I would just again make some conclusions. So when you design for the platform, you need to consider the needs of both parties, and you really need to make sure that they have these needs. And then actually, when you apply your knowledge, your design process to one party, you may influence the other in a positive or negative way. And yes, service design is a powerful tool. When you, even in a couple of days, you can achieve amazing results and get new ideas and new insights. I will be happy to answer the questions if there are any.
A question. So actually, you did a great job, and it's a lot of like really key and cool things. But how long this project took?
Which one? The last one with Prozoro?
Yes, the like two parts of the projects.
Well, they are not really related to each other. They just one led to another. But the design sprint usually takes between 2 and 3 weeks. So we have some time between the workshops, but you might say it's 3 workshops, 1 interview for each participant, and that's the project.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, probably not. So, Oleg, thank you for delivering this topic. It was really interesting and informative. Tomorrow, all of you will get link with the recording because we didn't announce in the beginning that session will be recorded. Okay, so we got a question. So, Oleg,
I see the question. Thank you. Do we keep working with the client after implementation phase? Well, we want to. We suggest every client that we will be very useful on the implementation phase. But because we are consultants, we want to charge for our services on the implementation side phase as well. And quite often the customers think they don't need us, so they don't really ask us for follow-up. But in some cases, like in Prozora case, just because the project is very interesting and actually we are beneficiaries because they are saving millions of taxpayers' money and we are taxpayers as well. We actually stay with them. We check with them regularly, like once every 2 or 3 weeks to see what's going on, how their prototypes go, and sometimes advise them on some things they might not consider. But fortunately, last year, we started to be invited on this implementation phase as well. And this is actually very inspiring when you see how the idea evolves and get being implemented, because actually a lot of ideas change when they get implemented. So you see a continuous evolution of cases. Okay. How to get participants to trust you in the interviews? This is a good one. Thank you. Actually, you accept civil servants, which is just a separate case because the topic was very sensitive. In the less sensitive topics, even if they're related with money or with health or with something else, it's not really that difficult to get. But I want to clarify. Are you talking about the participants? How to trust? How to convince them to do the interview, or you're asking about the users whom we interview? Can you please elaborate? I'll talk about the users for the moment. So basically, despite the fact that we never pay for the interview for the users, they are ready to participate for two reasons. First of all, because we have to pick a right challenge. The challenge is relevant to them. So this is something they want to talk about. People to the interview with the challenge you have, then this is probably a wrong challenge and nobody wants to talk to you because it's not important to anybody. And then once on the interview, we are not talking about our product, our project, our solution. All questions are actually related to the past experience of people. So when you talk to people and you talk about them, instead of talking about your product, they're usually very open. There might be some differences between the cultures, but for Ukraine, well, we are open enough. So usually we don't have any problem approaching users and talking to them for quite a long time, even for the sensitive topics. And about the participants, well, it's rather easy. We are telling them that this is the only way we work. So there is a choice. They do the project with us and they would go to the interview, or there is no project. And sometimes we lose projects because of this, but then they have no choice. And actually they're scared at the beginning, but they enjoy doing it after they do it for the first time. Well, of course, you need to have a small talk at the beginning of the interview, introducing yourself, explaining what is your interest, explaining that, well, basically the interview is not recorded and it's fair to you for you to say anytime that, well, you don't want to continue, etc. So there are some, I believe, regular stuff. Then, well, because you talk about person, not about a product, they usually open. Thank you for the question. What is my practice concerning the recording of the interviews? It's interesting. We always say to the participants who would do the interview that if you want to do the recording, you should, of course, inform the user. It's just honest and polite. But we don't really recommend you to do the recording for the several reasons. First of all, it might confuse you because you are doing it most likely for the first time, and it will just you will be uncomfortable because you know that you are being recorded. Then it will be probably uncomfortable for the person whom you interview because again they know that they are being recorded. And the third, which is the most important one, because the schedule for the design sprint is so tight and good interview lasts more than an hour, most likely you will not have enough time to listen your interview once again. So you would do the recording, but then you would not simply have time to listen to it once again. So that's why we recommend them just to take notes during the interview to show, well, basically not to forget the key points, but not the recording. Sometimes sometimes somebody does the recording. Well, we are not objecting about it, but we didn't really find it useful. Okay. If there are no more questions, I would probably switch my role to the co-organizer of the Service Design Marathon. So thank you again for joining us today. And to announce the speaker who is joining us tomorrow. He is really a star. It's Jesse Grimes, who is the Vice President of Service Design Network, and he is the chief editor-in-chief of Touchpoint magazine, which you probably know. And he will be presenting a very interesting topic on how to work as a service designer with startups. I know that this is the topic which is quite challenging for many service designers. I was lucky to see this presentation before, and it's really an outstanding one. So I really advise you to join us tomorrow. Thank you for joining.